Today's lesson is Chapter 10, Lesson 11 on pages 771 through 776. Our objective is I can divide fractions by whole numbers. Question 1. When using the model, it is important to look at the entire model after dividing it into parts to determine our new blank. Question 2. The blank of the fraction tells us how many parts we need to look at.
How do you divide unit fractions by whole numbers? For example, 1/2 divided by 3. In this lesson, you will learn to divide fractions by whole numbers using a model. Let's review. We already know that a unit fraction is a fraction with the numerator of 1. For example, in the fraction 1/5, we look at the numerator, we see that's 1, which makes this a unit fraction. We also know that whole numbers are the counting numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 5, or 10. Remember, these numbers don't have numerators or denominators. So let's look at the problem 1/3 divided by 4. So if we take a look at our dividend, which is our fraction, our first part of the division problem, we see it's 1/3, which means we're going to draw a hole, or a rectangular hole. We divide it into 3 parts because our denominator, our bottom number, is 3, and we're shading in one of those parts to represent 1/3. We look at our whole number, which is our divisor, our second part of the division problem, and we see that it's 4. This tells us we need to divide the whole rectangle into 4 new parts. Now, if we look at the new total parts that we've made, we see that we've made 12 new parts, which tells us our new denominator is 12. Now, if you look back at the fraction, the numerator of the fraction is 1, which means we need to look at one of those total new parts, and that tells us that our answer is just 1/12. Now, a common mistake for this same problem, 1/3 divided by 4, again, we start out with our 1/3. After dividing it into 4 parts, we need to remember to look at the entire whole, which means we're looking at the new parts of the entire rectangle, and we see that we've gone all the way from 1 to 12 new total parts, which is how we get our denominator of 12. We're not just looking at the shaded part for our denominator. So let's look at another problem, 1/2 divided by 3. So again, if we start with our dividend, our 1/2, our fraction, we know we have a whole, we divide it into 2 parts, and we shade in one of those, that's representing 1/2. We look at our divisor, which is our 3, and we want to divide that whole into 3 parts. So again, if we count the total number of parts in that entire rectangular whole, we see that there's 6 new parts, which means our new denominator is 6. Looking back at our fraction, 1/2, we see that our numerator 1 tells us we need to just look at one of those parts to represent our answer, and so we get 1/6. In this lesson, you have learned how to divide unit fractions by whole numbers by using a model.
All right, let's take a look at this in your book. I'm on page 771. So remember, we're dividing unit fractions, which means that it has 1 as the numerator, by whole numbers. So in this example of models, it says that Elijah is sorting his music into playlist. 1/2 of his music is rock. He wants to make 3 separate rock playlists. So we know we have to do 1/2 divided by 3. So in this case, we can make a whole, so 2 halves, so is our whole here. Now here's our 1/2 of rock music. And we have to divide this into 3 separate rock playlists. So I'm going to break this up into 3 rock playlists. But then I have to also break up this part because I have to break up my whole so that I can see what my new denominator is. So remember, we're looking at 1/2, so that 1 tells us we're looking at one of these parts that we divided it into. So now I have 1, but for our denominator we have to count how many total parts I made. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now we have 1/6. And then at the bottom here, we can always do the inverse operations. We can do 1/6 times 3, which you know is the same as 1/6 times 3 over 1. And we get 3/6, which is the same as 1/2, so that we know our answer was correct. All right, look back at these two questions, and I just talked about this one when I was in the book, and we had talked about this one too, so answer those in the form, please.